February 24th. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. Start with the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next takes us to the approval of the open session meeting minutes from January 29th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And next up is policies for second review.
Good morning, everyone. We have 3 policies on in the agenda for second review. 1-17, statement of non-discrimination, 2-19, contracts with the board, and 3-2D, classified personnel suspension and dismissal. These were at the policy committee meeting in January, went to the February board meeting for first review, and I've received no recommended changes, revisions, questions from any stakeholder group since the board meeting. Staff would recommend that this go to the board for approval at the March 2nd meeting of the board.
I have no additional comments to any of them. Todd, are you okay with us making a motion for all of them to go to the full board for a second review?
I'm good.
Okay, so I move that we send policy 1-17, policy 219, policy 3-2D to the full board for second review.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. That brings us to policies for first review.
Okay, the first policy you have before you is 1-1, election of the Board of Education. And some revisions were necessary to this policy due to a statutory change. And so what I have done is that the statute obviously was changed previously because we had 2 sets of language under E. And so what I have done is remove the language that is no longer relevant. So that's the only change to that policy.
The only question I would have is on the, I guess, the administrative guideline part. 9, it says the board consult county executive committee of the appropriate political party. Shouldn't we consult the Board of Election as well?
The
Or
statute
is
does
that done
not.
prior to that point?
Yeah, the statute doesn't require that. This is just language strictly from the statute. Now, in practical purposes, when this has occurred, we have let the Board of Elections know.
And they're
So-
on there under C, right?
Yeah, their
Okay.
contact information is included in there so that when you're going through the process, that information is readily available to whoever is doing it.
So I have a question, and I think we've talked about this before, Michelle. So what happens, from my legal background, what happens if one of the parties, if there's a vacancy, goes to the party and they don't make a recommendation within 30 days? What happens?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the statute gives a time limit for which the party needs to respond and doesn't say, and if they don't, where do you go? And I think that at that point, we would need to consult with the Board of Elections.
Okay.
And this may be something that we want to bring to our local delegation to see if they want to add additional language as to what do we do from there. Do we go back to the previous policy or that which other districts use and take applicants? It just isn't clear.
Okay. It's fine. I was just going to throw that out there,
Yeah.
but I have no other comments to 1-1 or the administrative guidelines.
Staff would ask that these both go to the board for review. First review for the policy 1-1 and then for review of 1-1 administrative guidelines.
Okay, do you want to do these all together or one at a time?
Probably one at a time since it's slightly different procedures with a policy versus an administrative guideline.
Okay.
So I move that both policy 1-1 and 1-1 administrative guideline go to the full board for first review.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That brings us to policy 3-3.
Yes, 3-3, and we again have both the administrative guideline and the policy for this. And these changes were to address, it's part of our regular review, first of all. And so it was adding language that we don't have in our policy and cleaning it up some. Our policy, when I reviewed it, and I've kind of talked about this for years, was a little disjointed and unclear. A lot of the strikeouts you see were struck out and then moved to another location. So some of the red is current language just moved in a place that made more sense for the flow of the policy. And then there was some additional language added to clarify. We had professional employees and a resignation section. We didn't have certified in all employees or classified in all employees. And then I also clarified it to be professional/certified. I don't necessarily like the line professional just to mean our instructional folks, because we have professionals in all of our roles, but so I clarified that to be certified and then classified in all employees. So those are the proposed changes. And then in the administrative guideline that goes with this policy, we had some changes based on administrative agency decisions by the EEOC, where they specifically said that criminal records checks have to be related to the offense, and a criminal record check has to be related to the position the person is holding, and it should not be as broad as many districts' policies were. So we went through this and tried to clarify, and also to add this to be applicable to volunteers. We always said it was applicable to volunteers, but didn't have that clearly enumerated in the policy. So that's what we've tried to do with the administrative guidelines.
So the only question that I have on the very first page, we crossed out that a person will not be eligible to be employed by the district if his or her criminal record shows that the individual has been convicted of a crime. Did we move that somewhere else?
There is the language about that we look at in-state and out-of-state. We didn't leave it as plain as that. We kind of broke it up to be more clear as to what types of offenses. So it's not just, that it's any crime. It may be that a traffic offense that's also a criminal matter doesn't impact you. So we tried to make it clearer as to what specific offenses would matter. And that starts on page 205 in red, that factors that weigh against a person being hired, allowed to volunteer. And then it breaks out all sorts of different criminal behavior. So
I guess my question is this, did we make it more subjective instead of objective by doing this?
Well, the EEOC has said we can't do just crimes in general.
Okay.
Because there's folks that there's populations of people that get charged and convicted at a higher rate. So you have to look at the specific behavior.
Okay, that's what my question. So it is more subjective.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another strikeout that you and I talked about that I wanted to make clear, or may not be in this policy. I don't think it is. Never mind, I apologize.
Okay. That was my only question about these changes.
I had a couple. Going to the first page of the policy, it looks like maybe third paragraph, the superintendent shall report annually to the board on progress. When is that done? Because I don't recall that.
That has been part of the policy language. I will work with I think Dr. Barnes would do that, and I'll work with Dr. Harris to make sure that he's putting that in place on an annual basis for the board.
Okay, and then a couple paragraphs down, all vacancies must be publicized. Is there a length of time that they have to be posted, or? I guess that's my next question. It says that some positions don't have to be posted if we have a qualified applicant. In my world, everything has to be posted. I mean, is that something, I guess I'm questioning, do all positions have to be posted or not? And for how long?
Yeah, we generally publicize all positions. The length of time depends on the the need for filling the position. We usually look at a minimum of 7 to 10 days. But there's times that we have an emergency, someone leaves and the position really needs to be filled quickly. And since the hiring process does take an extensive period of time, given background checks and all of that. And then there is the ability for the superintendent to forego publicizing if we've got somebody who's, right there, a lateral position or something like that. It's not a legal requirement that we publicize. We generally do it just to be sure that we're getting the best qualified candidate for the position.
Okay, and that is a good lead in for my next question on page 2, where it states, look like maybe the second paragraph, employees within the school system will be given priority. I mean, I know that's kind of an unwritten rule, but I think that sends a very negative message to the outside to apply for any position inside our school.
It's only if they're equally qualified and suitable for the position. So it wouldn't be that someone would be given priority if they're not as qualified, but it's given all factors equal, the already being committed to the district would be a benefit in your favor as an applicant.
Okay.
That's the reason for the recommended change.
Then I've got circled on page 5 under employment procedures. All applicants selected for employment must be recommended by the superintendent. Is that true?
That's under state law, yes.
So if we hire a bus driver, Dr. Houlihan has to sign off on it?
That personnel hiring form that you get, the personnel agenda every meeting, that's done through the superintendent approval process. So he's already approved those recommendations coming to you.
Okay, and I've got 2 more. Sorry for all the questions on page 6, where we're talking about personnel files. Where do we stand with like the COVID-19 and so forth in personnel files? I mean, I think that's probably coming soon. Is that something that, I don't think we're keeping track of that now. Is that something we'll have to keep track of going forward?
We currently, if people have a medical condition that's reported to us, that's a separate file. It's part of the personnel file, but it's separate in that no one can access it except for very limited authorized under state statute personnel, so that it's not part of a traditional file. And there's nothing that says we keep COVID type information. Now, there may be a change in legislation to have us require, certain things, vaccine information, those things. But right now, that just is part of a separate medical file for an employee.
Okay. And then last question, a couple paragraphs down on where it talks about promotions and lateral moves. It sounds like the board has to approve any administrative hire. What about administrative lateral moves?
Lateral
If we're taking
moves.
a principal to another school.
So if, for example, Dr. Houlihan were to move a principal from Weddington Elementary to Rayview Elementary, that is within his statutory and contract authority. If he's going to promote someone from an assistant principal at Wedding to the principal at Rayview, that would have to come to the board for approval.
Okay.
But,
All right, very good. That's all I got.
but
He
in
does always let
practice,
you know.
but in practice though, he brings it to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's all I have.
We
Any other
would,
questions?
staff would ask that these 2 go to the board for the March 2nd meeting for review.
I move that we send 3-3 and 3-3 administrative guidelines to the full board for first review.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Next brings us to 3-13.
3-13 nepotism. This was part of the regular review as well. Obviously, you can see them in chapter 3. And so what I've tried to do is clarify this policy, make the definitions more clearer and also more inclusive, and then just kind of move the policy around to some extent and clarify it as well.
I have no comment.
I have none.
Okay.
No.
We would
Yes.
ask that this go to the board for review at the March meeting.
I move that we send 3-13 to the full board for first review.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Brings us 3-15, employee conflict of interest.
Yes, this policy was part of the regular review, and when I went through it, there were some components that we didn't have that I saw in other policies or had come up in our district that I tried to find language or develop language that made sense to address issues that we may have seen throughout the years, and to clarify some things. And so that's basically the revisions to this policy. The administrative guideline, the revisions in that, just so that you can talk about both in conjunction, deal with the change in the process. When we first adopted this policy, there was a paper form that was delivered to administrative staff to sign and send back. Since we have adopted the Safe Schools platform, we have updated that process, and it goes out electronically to folks, and they review the policy, and then there's a separate module that comes out and says, I do not have any conflicts of interest to report, and I understand the policy. And then so the folks who are administrators under this policy receive that twice a year, and they sign off on that.
Okay. I like the changes.
Only comment I had was on B on page 105. Should board members not be included in there as well on administrative guidelines?
You don't necessarily have to fill out the form like this. You have your code of ethics that you sign when you come in. We could add the board to it. We just have handled the board through the code of ethics and then staff with this type of reminder.
That's fine.
I like
I'm good
on
with that.
page 2D that we tightened our intellectual property section. Even though I think that F would take care of it, but I like the addition of our intellectual property. Okay. So unless anybody, does anyone? Oh, sorry.
We would like these to go to the board for review at the March meeting as well.
I move that we send policy 3-15 and the administrative guideline to the full board for first review.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next brings us to administrative guidelines, school assignment 4-13.
Yes, we're proposing a change to this just for the current school year. As was discussed in curriculum, and I believe will go to the board at the March meeting. There are some programs where we're not going to be having dual language at the kindergarten level for the 21-22 academic year. So this would allow a rising kindergartner who has an older sibling currently in that program just at Marvin or Kensington to transfer into that school. So the kindergartner will be with their sibling at the same elementary school. And then when we're able to reinstate the dual language program that's available to those students, they would be able to shift right into that. The caveat is that that student who's allowed to go, that rising kindergartner, would have to enroll in that program to remain at the school.
So I asked, and I have a question. I would like to know how many students are at Marvin and Kensington that are outside of their home school. And with respect to Kensington, I don't know how we can possibly allow students from outside of that school that aren't zoned to that school into Kensington, given its enrollment, its current enrollment.
Yeah, I did get the numbers from Ms. Garner last evening. The Kensington number is very low, 5 at this point. And I'm not sure, I'd have to look into each one of those to see if it's a EC sibling, if there's another reason why they're in that program, but obviously those numbers are very, very low. Marvin is a little higher, but they're not as high on the
right? I'm not as worried about Marvin, but I am worried about Kensington. So, we have to look at that on a case-by-case basis, or say that we can't let more kids into Kensington, even in the DL. I'm good with the sibling, just from a letting them into DLI once it opens up in 2022, 20, whatever the next school year is, because I just think that that's becoming an issue. But I'm good with this. Thank you for taking care of that.
So we would ask that this go to review for the board at the March meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Next brings us to discussion on grading policies.
So I had some parents reach out and a couple teachers reach out with respect to our decision in the grading practices and administrative guidelines that we talked about at our February board meeting. Just above, on the first page, just above standard operating procedures for assigning failing grades, we have during the 2020-2021 academic year, students will not be penalized for turning in an assignment 4 days after the due date. This was to give, we had a long discussion at our February meeting. It was to give grace to students in the pandemic. So I believe that the first question is, this is only for assignments, correct? Not for testing or quizzes, correct?
That's the way it's been interpreted. Yes, I think that's the expectation of the administration on that one.
Okay.
A lot of quizzes are taken. Are quizzes taken? So if you're online or you're at home, I would assume there's a certain time frame you have to complete the quiz.
Correct.
So if a teenager is working or taking care of siblings or a family member and they're not able to take the quiz, they would just get a 0? Or
if they're absent for the day, they can make it up. If they're sick, they have a mental health day, whatever.
But what if they're on virtual so that they can work?
I assume that they're working with their teacher and their principal in those situations. The language we had was assignments, and I don't know if that's, we certainly can expand it. I don't know. I'm going to let Dr. Houlihan speak. I saw him speak.
I don't know. I mean, when it comes to quizzes and tests for those who are on virtual, my expectation would be that teachers and principals are working with those individual students on a case-by-case basis. But I really don't know other than that.
So I read the word assignment being assignment, not quizzes and tests, but that's a question that came up. And the other one is because it's that the first sentence of there's only 2 sentences in the paragraph. And the first one says that students will be provided with an opportunity to make up work missed due to both excused and unexcused absences. Then the next sentence is that during the 2020, students will not be penalized. So some parents were asking if they had to be absent in order to get the 4 additional days. And I said, no, I believe that you get the 4 additional days, period. And is that correct? That's what our understanding. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the interpretation of the board and the administration when this was developed. The paragraph is to deal with extended time, not absences. So both sentences.
That's what I said. Okay. I think that their confusion was just, it was in the same paragraph. There was only 2 in it. Okay.
So Michelle, what is our asks there?
I don't think there's an ask. That was, I think, just for discussion. And
Okay.
we can certainly, if there's questions, now we'll be able to clarify with families that this discussion and point to the meeting if there's any concerns from school folks or parents.
Melissa, are you good?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay.
As
Next
long as
brings-
everyone's working with students, I'm
Yep,
good.
I agree.
I'm just strongly opposed to handing out 0s and not working with students and parents.
Awesome.
Next brings us to choice schools for 2021-2022 school year.
That time
Choice
of year again, where we look at the choice schools. And we've gone through the projections, and there are some schools that can be added. The concern of the administration in this is that the schools that can be added have not historically been choice schools, and are the projections and the numbers an anomaly this year due to COVID and parental decisions, and will we in the fall, or when we reopen fully, have those numbers be out of whack, and then we've opened choice schools where we really can't honor those requests.
I think that's a valid concern. We may have had students who pulled out for this year that may come back next year. Kindergarten enrollment for this year was down. So I'm worried about those students coming into the schools in kindergarten or first grade classes and what it would look like. It's hard to plan this year because our enrollment is down, but it could easily go back up, and the DPI is projecting it to be closer to what it was the year before this. So this is a hard decision this year because of COVID and the enrollment numbers that we're seeing. And I think that some schools change in the second semester too. So we're looking at, we as a district, in any district, we always look at 20-day or 40-day, but sometimes it's good to look at the second semester, because over winter break, a lot of families move and we see upticks in enrollment, especially on the west side.
And we may have seen, I'm sorry.
Or have been in the past. Yep.
I was gonna say, we may have seen some changes also due to the reopening of elementary schools at about that same time. It was past the 20th day numbers.
Yep.
There's two schools that have fallen out of, due to projections and current enrollment, out of eligibility for school choice. And that's Shiloh Valley Elementary and Monroe Middle. I think that's right. Yes. And so the superintendent administration would be requesting that we hold with the schools that were choice schools in the last academic year, so the current choice schools, but removing those two schools because they are now over the capacity to have a choice, to be a choice school.
Okay. I'm good with this.
So it's your request to take this to the full board in March?
It is.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, it brings us to action items for the full board. We are going to take policy 1-17, 2-19, 3-2D to the full board for approval on March 2nd. And we're looking to take policy 1-1, policy 1-1 administrative guidelines, policy 3-3, along with administrative guidelines, policy 3-13, 3-15, and 3-15, administrative guidelines for review, along with administrative guidelines 4-13, school assignment, and school choice to be approved the full board March the 2nd.
That's correct.
And with that, our next meeting date is March 24th at 9 o'clock. And at this point, I guess we'll stay on course with Zoom. At this point, I need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318-10 and 11 to review minutes from prior closed session meeting.
And for members of the board, I have just resent the link to the closed session meeting.
Okay, thanks. See you in a minute.